Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Stratch Professor, and today we're going to be going over my support tier list for 11.5. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It's quick, it's easy, just takes a couple of clicks. Really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream as well. We start every night around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually go till about 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. And check out the rest of the content as well. We do fresh tier lists and patch notes for every patch that comes out. And we have lots of champion guides, topical guides like best one trick, how to micro better, how to macro better, and tons of other content. So be sure to check all that out and like and subscribe if you enjoy it. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So as I did last time, and I think most people enjoyed it, I was able to get out all of the tier lists a little bit faster by using Markietter's tweet about what's going to be on the upcoming patch rather than waiting on the actual patch notes on Tuesday. I will still cover the actual patch notes, and I will let you know if anything dramatically changes in terms of where I think the meta is going. But these have been very, very accurate since he started doing them probably about 5 or 6 months ago. So we're just going to go off of Markietter's tweet here and then fill it out accordingly. So let's just go over this just really quickly as it pertains to support, and then we'll get right into the support tier list after that. So Black Cleaver, I don't think is going to matter that much. There's a chance that some champions, like maybe something like a Senna, might like something like this, or like Misfortune support, but I don't think it's going to matter too much. The one thing that it could change meta-wise is you might see more bruisers and less tanks, so you might see even more Garens and Dariuses and even less, like Orns and things like that, but I don't think that's going to shake up the support meta too terribly much. That would put a higher premium on tanky engaged supports like Leona, but I think there's already a pretty high premium on those types of things in the support role, so I don't think it'll matter too much. Serpent's Fang could be very interesting on someone like a Pike or a Senna, Misfortune, any sort of AD type of champion, because this is going to give you an answer to shielding champs. But it is still expensive. It's 2,600 gold, and you still are getting this instead of something else like Executioners, for example. And the fact that a lot of enchanters are also going to be getting Moonstone, and Moonstone is also just a huge threat. It's like, if you're playing into this, if you're getting Serpent's Fang, it's like, yeah, you're cutting the shielding, but you're not affecting the healing that much. And so that might just be a fool's errand to try to do that. Now, if you are against certain matchups where there are going to be big shields, so if you're against, if you have like some kind of AoE ability, like maybe a Senna ultimate, and you're against someone who's going to be getting a Locket, then like that would help out against Locket potentially. If there is a champ that gets shields that also has shields themselves and they have Locket, so maybe it's like a Lulu who's running Locket or something, or Janna who's running Locket, that would make it even more interesting. It's mostly going to be relevant against stuff like Sterix or Set, like Sterix in particular. So this is going to be a big deal for some matchups in the top lane and maybe in the jungle, but I don't think you're going to be facing a ton of Sterix early on as these AD champions. So I don't know. It's interesting. It could be a counter item, but I don't think it's going to affect the meta too much overall. Seraphine is getting a specific nerf. Now at higher elos, I think this is going to matter more for support and ADC. Seraphine, let's be honest, at like lower elos, most people don't leverage those auto attacks anyways. They let a lot of the notes just drop off without getting power on them to begin with. So the rest of her kit is still pretty good for scaling with the Moonstone, the ultimate, your W for the movement speed and the shield. So I think she'll still be like okay, especially like gold and lower. She's going to fall off a little bit at higher brackets. But this cooldown on the ultimate to 180 seconds is actually a pretty big deal, so that will make her fall a little bit. So this is why I nudged her down to tier 2. I don't think it's going to completely gutter her. I could be wrong about that, but I think she will probably drop down to like 50 or 51%. Still extremely powerful, but there's going to be much more downtime between her ultimates. And the best case scenario of really using all of those notes, you will be losing a lot of damage. Udyr might fall off. Rammus might maybe a little bit less. There is no change to Skarner here. But you might be seeing less of this. I don't really know. I'll have to think about the jungle tier list. I think he'll still be okay in the jungle, but I think it'll probably just be more Skarner, Rammus types of champs. I don't think it's going to be a total shift in the meta. It'll just be different stuff that uses Chem Tank and Deadman's in the jungle. Okay, Shaco's support. This is really bad, so I just kind of knocked him all the way down. I think I had him in tier 2, but that's a pretty big hit to his damage overall. 5 damage doesn't seem like a lot, but you got to keep in mind how many times this thing fires as well. So it's pretty much nerfing his damage fairly significantly. In single target scenarios, it's going down 10, which, just think of that in terms of percentages. That's 30% less damage on these boxes at early levels. Now, obviously, as you max it out, it's gonna, drop down to maybe like 15% less damage, but it's still a very big deal. So Shaco was already very niche. Not a lot of people played him, so I don't think it'll affect the meta overall. If you're really good at Shaco, you could still make it work, but it's definitely not good news. And then Rel, she's losing 3 base armor, and then her cooldown is going from 11 seconds to 13 seconds. This is a big deal because it doesn't scale down very much, and people are already figuring out some counters to her, like Janna, and just other enchanters can be really good into her. Janna specifically because you can knock her out of her W with your tornado. So I think people are figuring out counter picks. She is still very good in solo queue, but this will definitely knock her down a little bit, maybe 1 or 2%. The 2 seconds cooldown is significant, so we'll see. So if she goes down a little bit, not only will it hurt her directly, but it will help other engage type of champions like Recon, like Leona. I think will become a little bit better if you start seeing Rel fall off. Okay. Azir auto attacks. Jason's not going to like this at all. The guy that I duo with at 10 less damage there is a very big deal in the early game. It does scale up late game, so once again, won't matter as much late, maybe a little bit, but early game, it is going to hurt a lot. You just never see Azir in solo queue. Most people are terrible with him, so it shouldn't matter too much in the solo queue or affect supports that much. Gragas, that's pretty much going to kill anybody, like the one person on the server who likes to play Gragas support. 80 mana, even for level 1 harassment, is just way, way too much. So, if you're a god with the barrels, if you always get the perfect bounce with those ultimates, maybe he becomes a little bit more or like you can still play him, but I don't think it's going to be that great. Senna, I'm not an expert on the Senna support. I think she does more lethality type of stuff. This is more for AD Senna, where you'd get the Kraken and the Ginsu's, which is Dedicated Duck's favorite build. Just if you haven't ever watched the chat, Dedicated Duck really, really hates that build. But anyway, so they've changed that around a little bit. That's more for ADC Senna. I don't think Senna's that great as a support right now, but if she is going to be played as a support, you're probably going to be getting stuff like Umbral and possibly Serpent's Fang. Maybe you can try out the new like Cleaver iteration. So I think there's other stuff you would be getting instead. Pike. Now this one might matter a little bit, and it's hard for me to really kind of wrap my head around just how useful this is going to be. It's going to be more healing in the laning phase for sure. Because it's got 35% base instead of 10% base when there are 2 or more enemies present. So if this allows him to just shrug off all harassment, then that could be really good. This does make tank Pike a little bit more appealing. I can't remember all of the ratios in terms of just how much you need lethality. Obviously the healing is scaling with lethality now too. So you'll probably still want at least Umbral Glaive, which is super good on him, but I don't know if you would want something like... I know people used to get Frozen Heart on him back in the day. The reason that tank gets a little bit more valuable is because now it's going to take them more time to do a lot of damage to you if you go for tank Pike. And then when you run away and you get all of that healed up, you're getting much, much more effective health out of it. So I don't know. I'd have to look and see. I think it's probably still just going to be, at least for the first couple of items, Umbral and maybe Prowler's Claw is really good on him. So maybe you go Prowler's Claw, Umbral, and then maybe it just depends on how the game's going. I'm not sure, but he might go up 1 or 2%. So this could be really, really good. It's hard for me to tell because I haven't played him in a long time and I don't play against him super often. But Prowler's Claw, in theory, is extremely good on him because you can jump to the back of somebody and pretty much guarantee your stun whenever you get that. And then Karma, she can harass more in the laning phase. This is okay. I don't think it's going to move her too much. They have buffed her a lot recently, but they really need to buff her overall shield or her movement speed that she gives on the shield. Something like that needs to happen. And the Serpent's Fang will really matter against her if someone gets Serpent's Fang top lane, like maybe, I don't know, Gnar or something like that, picks up Serpent's Fang to counter the set who's top lane, and then in team fights that might have some collateral, bad consequences for you if you're going for Karma. So I don't know. She's okay. She's at like 50% right now. She might go up a little bit, but I still think she's going to be weaker than some of the other enchanters, which we'll get into in a little bit. And I think that's it overall as far as it pertains to support. So let's go ahead and get in here. I don't want to spend too long doing that. All right, so number one, and some of this is going to be debatable, and some of it is going to depend on how good you are on some of these different champions, but I think that Recon is certainly going to be up there again right now, and a big part of that is, Seraphine got nerfed, who's one of the main sort of adversaries of Recon, because whenever you try to go in with Recon, she can just ult and pretty much cancel out your engage and turn the fight around, and she's going to outscale you and outperform with Moonstone half the time. And then Rel as well, whenever you try to go in, if Rel's in the game, she just presses E if you go on her partner, or you try to go on her for some reason, she just presses E and it will stun lock you out of your W, so that you can't ever engage on the person that she's attached to. It's not even a skill shot, she literally just presses E. So you have to either go on somebody else, or you have to bait that E out of her. It's very, very difficult to play against Rel. So since both of those got nerfed, I think that's going to put him in a better position and make him, one of the more premier engages out there right now. And you've seen him coming back in pro quite a bit, very quietly. Not a lot of people talk about Rakan. But if you look on 11.4, not a huge sample size, only 5 games. He's 4-1, but not a lot of games have been played either. But if you look back at 11.3, he was 60% win rate with 32 games. So once again, not like the most popular champ in the world, but still a decent amount of games played for that kind of win rate. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential there. And in solo queue, he's almost always just floating around 50% or so, just because he's hard to play and hard to make some of the decisions. So what is it about Recon? Well, first of all, like I just said, you've got the Seraphine and you've got the Rel that have been nerfed. Malachi has also been nerfed in the last couple of patches, and he's traditionally someone who's pretty good against Recon. So a lot of his bad matchups have been nerfed. And then there have been several buffs to different items that I think have helped him out over time, as he definitely scales pretty hard later into games. But Shirelia's is the big one that got changed, and the huge thing about this is now it has the ability power on it. It used to just have some janky stats that were bad. But this type of item has always been good. It just did not have good stats earlier in the season. It was 2,700 gold, didn't have ability power on it. It was just bad. And he scales really, really well with ability power because his E is a 1.6 AP ratio. So he really likes ability power. And this active is so good on him because not only does it allow him to engage, it speeds him up, but it also allows the rest of his team to follow up on his engage. Because what will happen sometimes as Recon is you'll see an opportunity to, go in and knock somebody up with your R plus W, especially if you're flashing to get him, and the rest of your team just won't be able to get there in time to follow up before the person can flash or dash or get away. But now you can give it to your team to get there. Another thing with Recon a lot of times is whenever you try to go in, then against a lot of champions out there, you have to try to fake out whatever their peel is, right? So if it's like a Morgana bind with a Q or a Lux bind, or just any sort of skill shot, a Janna Tornado, just something that's going to stop you from going in with your W. So you have to try to run up there with your ult and just sort of either flash whatever their skill shot is, or dodge it a little bit. Or you can just wait on them to flash first or to dash first. So if you start running at Ezreal, for example, he might E backwards, or Vayne might tumble. So you have to try to wait on them to use their mobility or use their skill shot before you go in with the W, or it's going to be a wasted engage and they can turn it around on you, right? If you get Lux binded, or if Ezreal successfully flashes your W, then you're in a really bad spot. So Shirelia's allows you to run up there and get even more speed and have even more time to try to fake them out and get them to use their stuff before you go in for the engage. So that extra mobility is just super, super nice on him. They did nerf Mandate as well a while back, and how that works with Recon is usually you would go in with your R plus W, your R would trigger Mandate, and then your W would trigger it, and you would get like 2 procs of the first part of Mandate, so it was basically 70 extra damage on your all-in rotation, which mattered a lot, especially in the early game, but now that they've changed that, you're losing 70 damage. So it's kind of a big deal. So that's why you want to go for Shirelia's. There are some builds that go Moonstone. If you have a lot of tanks on your team, you can do this if the fights are going to be dragged out and, go on for a long time. In general, you don't want those types of games because you want to kill them off of your rotation. Like, he can play the long game a little bit, but most enchanters are going to do that better. It's like a Lulu or definitely a Soraka or a Senna. Like, they're just going to beat you in really long fights. So it kind of depends on the matchup. There might be some places where Moonstone could be better than Shirelia's. But that is something to be aware of. And then as far as boots go, I still really like the Ionian boots. They did give this 5 extra ability haste a while back, and that's really nice on him because he has very long cooldowns that are high impact. So his W only goes down to 12 seconds, his E only goes down to 12 seconds, and of course you have his ultimate as high impact. So he has longer cooldowns than most other people. When you think about, Lulu's shield is like an E, or I'm sorry, her E is 8 seconds, and then you've got Janna's effectively somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 seconds on her shield if you're hitting your W and your tornado. So I think that this has benefited him a lot. So in other words, he gets a lot out of ability haste. And then he also really likes Flash and Ignite because he can get on that back line, ignite the squishies. His Flash allows him to reposition, helps him out with a bunch of his different combos. So he's operates really, really well with his summoners, using them proactively. Like, you're going to use that cooldown. You're not going to be holding it for very long. So that's why I think that Summoner Haste is really good. And then he has another just suite of items that are good. Like, he's got the Chem Tank now option, which is very nice if you have to go for those grievous wounds. Once again, likes the ability power, likes the ability haste. All that stuff is all good. Great beneficiary of that. He can use the standard Ardent Censer or Staff of Flowing Water. Especially if you take Font of Life, which he loves to go Guardians. That's going to work out really well. And then you can also just get Zeke's, which will make you a little bit tankier, gives you some nice armor and health there, and then basically gives a lot of extra on-hit damage to either a mage or one of your AD carries. So he can go for something like Zeke's plus Ardent Censer if you get a really fed Vayne or really fed Kai'Sa. So he does work really well with those hyper-scaling champions. So, just super versatile overall. Has great engage, can trade pretty well in the laning phase. Very resilient to ganks. This is another thing. If you get turbo camped bottom, which happens a lot, you can get away from a lot of situations with your W plus your E and things like that. And you can ward pretty safely, pretty deeply into their jungle because it's hard to catch him, right? If you're trying to ward deep and get a ward on their buff, and then the jungler shows up, you're probably going to be able to get away in a lot of situations. Now, be careful if you're against like a Skarner with Chem Tank or something like that. They will run you down, but a lot of junglers won't be able to catch you as Recon. So, good vision game, good engage, very safe during the laning phase, very versatile champ. He can peel, he can engage, got a nice suite of different items he can get. Really, his only weakness is that he is squishy, so if you get locked down by a lot of CC, like Rel chain stunned, Leona chain stunned, Maokai chain stunned, that type of stuff, then you're going to be in a bad situation. But you can mitigate that a little bit if you have to go like Mercury Treads or Unflinching or even Legend Tenacity. You can do that, although it's not usually a fantastic situation for him. So just be careful if they have a lot of CC. It could be a problem, but otherwise it's pretty good. And he's one of my favorite champs to play into some of these enchanters out there because he can kind of match them, or at least come closer than other tanks to matching their scaling, but then he also has a really good engage to shut them up and get on them. So if you're against something like a Jinx Lulu, I would probably rather play him than like a Nautilus or some of these other engaged champs out there. So, and that's becoming a really popular thing, which transitions into the next champion that I've moved up here, which is Lulu. So Lulu, I think, is going to take the crown as the best enchanter. I think Seraphine's going to get knocked down a little bit. And she has been doing really well on this patch, but I guess her win rate, is similar to some of the other ones. Seraphine is going to be a bit higher, but I think Lulu played correctly. Can do very well right now. There's a few reasons for that, and a lot of it is stuff in her kit that historically has been sort of a deficit to her or has been a hindrance, is now actually really good. So we'll start off with her ultimate. So the ultimate just gives you an infusion of health that just instantly gives somebody health, knocks people up, and then slows them for, I think it's like 6 seconds. It doesn't say what the numbers are there, but and that used to be kind of bad because it didn't scale with plus healing and shielding, right? So she would just get outscaled by stuff like Sona and Janna in years past because that did not count as a heal. However, this season, that's actually a huge benefit because it doesn't count as a heal or a shield, therefore it's not affected by grievous wounds. And people are buying a lot less plus healing and shielding now than they used to in the past, so it's not as much of a problem as it used to be. So most people are starting with Moonstone, which doesn't have plus healing and shielding on it, And then maybe you're getting something like Staff of Flowing Water second or Ardent Censer second, but that's only 10%. Right? Versus, you know, in the past, you would have been getting something like a Mikhail's potentially, which is 20%, or, you know, getting Redemption, which was also 10%. But basically, in the past, your first two items would probably have been something like Ardent Censer plus, you know, Redemption or something like that. So you would have had 20% by the time you got your second item. Now you're likely only going to have 10% after your second item. So it's not as much of a deficit, and it gets around Grievous Wounds. The slow is also really nice because that's going to keep reapplying the Font of Life, which means that you're going to keep reapplying Putrefier if you need to. So she's really good at dealing with Grievous Wounds. And some of these changes just allow you to double down on what's already really strong about her. So Staff of Flowing Water, for example, with Font of Life, you know, you're going to be able to keep this up for a long time. It's going to give you extra AP, which helps you scaling with all of your stuff. But then it also gives you that extra movement speed, which works really well with your W, which also gives people movement speed. And you could still go Ardent Censer if you want as well for the extra attack speed and the extra on-hit damage. But that's just really nice that it gives you that extra little bit of kind of doubling down on the movement speed for a champion like a Darius or like a Garen or something like that. So I think that is very nice. They have buffed her E over time as well to give it back. I think it's got the 240 base shield. Now it's a 8-second cooldown. So that's really nice. Gets around Grievous Wounds again really well. Now if they do get the shield breaker, that will obviously affect it. But if they're getting shield breaking against you, then that means that they're not getting Grievous Wounds against your Moonstone. So that's the thing, is she just presents a lot of different kinds of threats that are difficult for the enemies to deal with. It's like, okay, they're going to need Grievous Wounds to deal with Moonstone. They're going to need the shield breaking stuff if they want to deal with your E. And then they're going to need something to get to your back line because you're going to scale harder than almost anybody if you take something like Ardent Censer plus Whimsy plus Pix, because Pix is going to be offering somewhere between 80 to 100 on attack damage to your backliner, your Jinx, your Vayne, your Kai'Sa, that type of stuff. And they're getting extra attack speed off of your W, and they're getting extra movement speed to help them reposition. And they're getting all that protection from your R, which is not only a lot of health, but it's a knock-up, it's a slow. I mean, it's just all sorts of different buffs that she gives different people on your team. Or, you know, if your Vayne or whatever's not doing so well, you can just Whimsy and speed up your Hecarim or your Skarner or your Darius or whatever and give them a lot of extra movement speed. So she has just a lot of different threat that she can present to people. And she can hang out pretty far on the back line. Her ranges aren't as good as some of the other champs out there. She's got 650 on her shield versus like Janna's 800. But it's still going to be pretty good overall. So just really solid itemization. A lot of the popular ADCs that are coming out now are those hyperscalers. The Kai'Sa buff didn't really matter. Like I said, she's still super strong. You got Vayne, and then now Jinx is becoming more popular as well. And then Kog'Maw is getting a buff on this patch. Now, I don't know if he's going to be meta. I doubt it. But certainly if someone does play a Kog'Maw, Lulu is going to be one of the best out there to go with him. So just still really, really good itemization options. You know, Moonstone is going to be the standard, but if you do want that engage really badly, you can go for Shirelia's, and you honestly wouldn't be losing that much. It would help you be a little bit safer as well. So if you have like Darius and Skarner on your team or something like that, and you just want to run the boys in, you can do that with Lulu. So she has a lot of different options, very strong, high scaling, pretty good harassment early. It can be a problem late game if you get flanked by an assassin, and it is a little bit harder to ward with her because like you can check bushes with your Q, but basically if you get caught out, you're probably going to die. Like you might be able to ult and then Whimsy yourself and run, like Q them and run away. Like maybe you can get away, but she's definitely a little bit more dangerous than some of the other champs out there. But nevertheless, I think her scaling is through the roof, fits really well with a lot of champs right now, and just presents a lot of different threats, like I said, that get around everything. Like she's got the healing from Moonstone, she's got the shielding from E, she has the utility and the CC off of the W, off of the R. You can also polymorph a lot of assassins and like melee champs in a fight, right? So that really fed 8-0 Riven's gonna come running into your fight, you just polymorph her for 2 seconds, and she's probably going to get blown up. Or Echo thinks he's going to do something slick and dive you under tower, and then just ult and get away, and then you just polymorph him and he can't ult, and then he just dies. So that's something also that's very unique to Lulu, is it's just point click W, you can't do anything for 2 seconds on top of everything else. So she's one of the best at dealing with divers, dealing with dealing with assassins and things like that. So anyways, really strong champ right now. Just there is a bit of a skill cap to her for a couple of reasons. You do have to choose the correct option. So you have to choose, am I going to buff up my ADC with W, or am I going to polymorph the assassin or the diver? So it can be kind of tough to make that decision sometimes. And you can misclick. So if the assassin, the Zed, jumps right on top of your ADC and you're trying to polymorph the Zed, then you accidentally speed up the ADC, that could be death for your ADC. So you gotta be able to click correctly, especially in traffic. So it's a bit more mechanical than people might initially think, because a lot of her stuff seems like it's point click and not skill shots. But she's one of the few champions in the game where multiple really important abilities can be targeted towards enemies or allies, and so it's very, very easy to misclick it in traffic in a team fight. And sometimes, like, if they're literally standing on top of each other, it could just be luck, right? Whichever hitbox happens to be the one that the game chooses when they're overlapping, that could be life or death. So there are some intricacies in there, not only in terms of choice, but in terms of the mechanics, and sometimes just in terms of RNG if people are overlapping on top of each other. So you can get around that by, like, maybe sort of kind of, like, not aiming directly on the person, but, like, trying to, like, clip their hitbox, like, outside of their frame, kind of like what you see when you see, like, Thresh hook people through a minion wave or something. He'll, like, grab the bottom of their hitbox, he'll, like, touch their toe with his hook, and it just looks like, how did he hit that hook? It's the same kind of thing might be what you'd have to do at, like, super perfect Lulu play to get around some of those hitboxes overlapping a lot. So there is definitely, like, high level, in traffic mechanical stuff you have to do. It sounds kind of weird, but so there's a lot of room to mess up with her, and that's why she has a lower win rate. But if she's played at, like, a really top level, if you're making the correct choices, if you're getting the clicks correct, then she can be super strong. Okay, other ones that I'll mention now, I've still got Maokai. I nudged him down a little bit. I do think that he is still pretty strong. Win rate wise, he's still doing very well. He's at 53%. It's just there definitely are some things that are kind of problematic for him. Now, 2 of those are getting nerfed on this patch, so maybe he still should be number 1. But, like, Rel is a problem for sure. She's really tanky, and if she runs into a seed in horse form, she can jump off in her W form, and she gets a shield, and she can just absorb pretty much all of it. So some of these bigger tanks walking through the seeds can be sort of problematic. And then the stuff like the Udyr and the Skarner and the Rammus, a lot of those types of champs can get the buffed up Force of Nature, which gives a lot of movement speed and a lot of magic resist, or they'll get Spirit Visage. Usually they're just getting some kind of tankiness about them. And then, of course, Skarner has his shield with W he can turn on, and then Udyr has turtle form. So a lot of kind of these meta junglers can require you to have more items before you put a dent in them. So that's kind of an issue. And then if the enemy gets certain kinds of souls, like if they get Earth Soul or Water Soul, I mean, that's usually bad news anyways, but it's really bad news for Maokai because it just pretty much invalidates your seeds. Also, if they have something like a Soraka who was buffed a lot last patch, just most enchanters are kind of bad news for you. If they're standing around and they just shield through what you have and just kind of heal through it with Moonstone, especially Soraka, then it's just not going to do a lot. So you have to be kind of careful if you're going for the AP version. But I have been trying out a tank version, and there have been more champs that have been trying that out as well. And I still think that that's pretty good. If you want to go Chem Tank first, that gives you Engage, and you do have a really, really nice Engage if you have Chem Tank, because you can run up, you press W on somebody, even if they, flash or dash away or whatever, you're still going to stick to them, you're still going to land it. So it's a really nice piece of Engage if you get the movement speed to get close enough. And then you can go, after that, it gets a little bit dicier. I have been trying Zeke's, and I've had some success on that. I haven't played a ton of games as Tank Maokai support, but I do think this has a lot of potential. It's got the health, it's got the armor, and then you're constantly going to be CCing people with your Qs and your Ws and all that. So this is just pretty much going to be up permanently for the extra on-hit damage to your AD carry or whoever else is fed and attacks a lot. So I think that can be pretty decent. You don't have great access to Grievous Wounds if you go for this build. you know, you can get Thornmail, but that does require the ADC to actually attack you. I guess once you complete the Thornmail, it is just based on your CC, I think, immobilizing. So yeah, I guess once you get the full Thornmail completed, then that is pretty solid. But when you're building it, when you have Bramble Vest, they have to physically attack you to get the minus 40%. But it does have good health. It does have good armor on it. So that is probably what you would get second in a lot of situations. So that can be a pretty good build. And then the game's probably over by that point, but you also do have the option of going for something like Abyssal Mask if they have a lot of magic damage and you just want to, you know, increase your team's damage. That can be pretty good too. So I think there are a lot of good options, a lot of different ways you can play him. If you're going the AP version, you'd still go for Mandate into either Demonic Embrace or something I've been trying a lot. You can also get Morellonomicon. If they don't have a lot of healing reduction, I've also been trying out Void Staff. I did the math on this a little bit, and obviously it doesn't have the health on it like Demonic Embrace does, or the resistances, so that's kind of lame. But I believe if they have, I don't remember what the exact number is, but much more than 50 magic resist on the target, I think Void Staff does more than Demonic does. It depends on how much HP they have and how much magic resist they have. You know, the best case scenario for getting Void Staff is they don't have that much HP, but they have a lot of magic resist, so it's like a tank that's just stacking magic resist, which you can see this sometimes, right? If you, someone gets Mercury Treads really early on, and then they start working towards like a Banshee's Veil or something like that, which is becoming more popular with like mid laners, then that's definitely going to be a scenario where it's good. But if it's something like, you know, a new Deer who's getting plated steel caps and, you know, he's rushing Dead Man's Plate after his Abyssal or whatever, his Chem Tank, then that would probably favor Demonic. So it just sort of depends. It's just this item's cheaper. It's 2,500 gold. Yes, you're not getting the health, but it's a similar amount of damage, possibly more damage for 500 less gold. And I think that that's pretty clutch because that's going to allow you to get Oblivion Orb plus Void Staff if you're wanting the healing reduction and to do as much damage as possible. I think that that's a pretty good build. So anyways, I think he's good. Has a lot of CC, has tank options, has damage options. I think he's the best AP champion out there because the seeds give you a ton of vision and they do just an astronomical amount of damage. If you spec into them, it's like 600 damage per seed. So just lots and lots of options, very versatile. Either the best AP champ, in my opinion, that can be played in bot lane right now, or pretty serviceable high-end tank. So maybe not quite as strong in some scenarios as something like a Leona or a Rel. He does require the item or you to have flash or you to get a flank to engage, so it is harder to engage, but he is good at peeling. He does have a lot of CC. He's still got the vision, even in tank mode. So he's still going to be pretty solid in my mind in a lot of scenarios. And then Leona's another one who is going to be a nice beneficiary of the Rel, of the Seraphine nerfs. She just has a low cooldown ult, 90 seconds. There's a lot of CDR you can get out there right now. You've got your Mythic, and then usually second item is going to be Zeke's very often on Leona. So we'll see if we can keep this under like 45 minutes or so. So we'll speed up a little bit here. But yeah, nothing really new on the Leona front. It's still just going to be lock it into Zeke's. I guess you could go Chem Tank if you want. I'm not sure what the win rate differential is there, but she doesn't need the Chem Tank as much as other people because you have an 1100 range engage. So you're already pretty good to go on that front. And it's on a 90-second cooldown. So engaging is not really her problem. It does have a higher win rate overall than Locket. Locket does help your team out more. The fact that you are getting some ability haste off of that is pretty nice. And you are doing some additional damage you know, when you have this item. And then it is just tankier in general, right? It's going to have 150 more health. And then it actually has less armor and magic resist. I forgot that Locket had 30-30. That's actually pretty big. But either way, you are paying 300 more gold. So it's useful. Either way is fine. And then you have a suite of different options here. So you can go for the Zeke's, which is going to, you know, give more damage to particularly your AD carry if they're strong. If you need the Grievous, you can go for the Thornmail. Or if you're trying to help out against Assassins or whatever, then you could go for Knight's Vow. So lots of different options. great engage, great all-in early on. If you have someone that can really take over the game in the early game, it's going to be pretty strong. Now, there are more Banshee's Veils running around out there. There are, like, more Edge of Nights running around out there. So you got to be careful with those 2 items. And then if you still get matched up against things that can peel really well, then you can get outscaled. So be careful. Definitely not going to be as strong into stuff like an Ezreal, Vayne, Kai'Sa. Those people can dodge pretty well. And Gale Force, I mean, that's one of the main reasons why I stopped playing Leona, is I just got so sick and tired of Gale Force. And everybody's running that item. There are some people, you know, who will think that item's not as good. It's insane. I mean, just, like, yes, you are losing some sustained damage off of Kraken, but the fact that you get an extra flash on a 90-second cooldown effectively, even if it did no damage whatsoever, I still think people would get it. Because that's just so strong. It's just like a get at it. I mean, how powerful is Flash? Just think about it. And then you get this, which is not, I mean, yes, you can't flash over walls or whatever, but it's basically Flash in a lot of circumstances, on a 90-second cooldown, on an ability that's already about, or on an item that's already about 100% efficient. So that's the thing, is that your R is dodgeable. A lot of the main target you're going to want to aim for most of the time is the AD carry. They are going to have that, so that's rough. There's still going to be a lot of Zhonya's Hourglasses out there too, which is another thing that's annoying to engage into. So she does have a lot of options, but there's also more mobility in the game than ever, and mobility just performs really well against her ultimate and her E. Right, like I said, with Maokai, you're not getting away. Right, if you flash in or you're running at them with Kim Tank and you press W, it doesn't matter if they Gale Force and flash, you're getting on them. Now, they might pull you under tower if you do that, which is bad, but at least you're getting on them. So she is nice. She does have a lot of power, but the fact that there is so much mobility does diminish the power of your ultimate a little bit, just because it can be dodged. Versus, you know, like Recon, yes, Recon can be dodged, as I said before, but if you're running at them with Shirelias with your R, they either have to use their mobility early, or you just touch them with your R first and then hit them with your W. So I think that Maokai and Rakan work a little bit better against mobility types of champions if they can position correctly. Versus, I guess with Leona, you can run up with Kim Tank and just wait on them to use their mobility first, and if they don't, you just Q and auto attack them. So I guess that is a thing too. So it can be played around. It can be played around, but it certainly makes it a little bit more challenging than it has been in the past. Okay. But moving on here, we've got Seraphine. We already talked about her a little bit. I still don't think it's going to completely gut her, but it's certainly not going to be good news, the extra 20 seconds early on the ult. But she still does have pretty good harass in the landing phase with the Q. Like I said, a lot of people don't even leverage the notes very well. And like gold and lowers, they're not even using the auto attacks as often as they should to get the notes damage. So it will matter at higher elos, that nerf, but a little bit less at lower elos. But she still is really good at team fights, right? That ultimate is still going to be there a lot. I mean, maybe you could consider taking Ulti Hunter or something like that to make up for it. Maybe now you get Ulti Hunter plus Ghost Poro or something, which is still not terrible. It's extra vision, and it would still give you 30 extra AP. Her AP scaling's okay. So you could do that, or you could get something other than Staff of Flowing Water that's going to give you extra ability haste. So you could just get Kim Tank second. You could get something like a Redemption second. So she might be able to make up for that deficit with her ultimate just by changing her itemization around a little bit. So it's definitely not good, but I think there will be options with her. Still good harassment early, still the W for the extra movement speed, the shield, the ultimate combined with your E is still like an insane like 2.5 or 3 seconds worth of CC chain. So she's still going to be extremely powerful in the right circumstances, so she'll be alright. But I did nudge her down just a little bit. I think if anything, people will play her a little bit less, because I'm sure all the other tier list videos will say, oh, she's dead in the water, you know, there's no recovering from this, that type of thing. So you will see her a little bit less in general. So you might actually get to play her if you enjoy playing her and she's just picked and banned every game. That could actually be good news for you. Okay, and then we'll go into Thresh. Now, Thresh is really high skill cap. If you're extremely good on him, then, you know, he could have, you know, he could be tier 1 worthy. Now, I will say, even in Pro right now, on 11.3, he was doing really well with 61%, but There haven't been a ton of games on 11.4, so you got to take it with a grain of salt, but he's only 46% on 11.4. That's only after 13 games, though, so we'll have to see how that shakes out. But Thresh has been a major beneficiary of all of the ability haste items. Like I pretty much talk about every tier list. His Q scales extremely well with ability haste because it's a flat 3-second reduction. So it's not percentage based. So that means that if you have, 12-second cooldown and then you get a 3-second cooldown off of that, it goes down to 9 seconds. You just saved effectively like 25% cooldown on that, right? But if somehow you have a 9-second cooldown on it and then you get a 3-second reduction, then all of a sudden you saved 33% cooldown reduction on it. So the lower it goes, the greater the percentage benefit of your Q. Where in theory, if you could get down to a 3-second cooldown, which you're not going to be able to do, but if somehow you could, you would have infinite hooks. So in other words, every little bit of ability haste starts becoming more and more valuable to him as you start to approach infinity off of those hooks. I guess you would be limited by your mana at that point, but my point is you're throwing a hell of a lot of hooks. More than you used to. As long as you're hitting them in combat, you can definitely be a CC machine, and that's something that sets him apart. Not really apart from like Leona, but he can do that from a distance. He doesn't have to get close, right? So he can just keep throwing these hooks, just locking people down, allowing your team to just CC, aiming for those picks. And that's really where his versatility comes in, is he's an engaged champ. Like, he can Q and he can go in, and flay people and lock them up and all that stuff. But he can also peel really well. So when you have these diving champs running at you, he can gum them up quite a bit. You've got a new deer running at your AD carry. You can just drop your ult. As soon as they get slowed by it, you can hook them, flay them back, and then your hook's almost going to be up again by that point. Hook them again. You can, throw out your lantern and spread out to help your AD carry reposition. So you kind of have all of these tricks. They just allow you to kind of control the geometry of the fight, to let people reposition, to stop people from moving into certain areas. You can, engage in a fight and, help like your jungler jump in. You can throw the lantern backward to pull people forward. There's just all sorts of ways you can manipulate the space in fights and lock people down with Thresh. So at a really high skill cap, if you're extremely good on him, especially if you're playing with someone who has a brain, like if you're duoed with someone or you just happen to have some good teammates in solo queue, then he can be very strong. So I think that's why he has benefited so much in the preseason as far as win rate wise, is just because he can do that. And he has sort of adopted this more of a hang back play style with Guardian and kind of play as a peeler instead of going all in all the time. And then that allows you to go for this kind of super team fight type of build where you get Locket plus Redemption, which stops the initial burst of damage in a team fight, but then also like has that follow-up heal after the Locket wears off. So you have a lot of team fight potential. Not many other champs can get both of those items. Now he can also go for something like a Shirelia's, which is becoming a little more common. And, he can get, stuff like Knight's Vow and Thornmail, so he does have some other options in his kit. So like a lot of these top-end champions, there is a lot of versatility to him, but I think that I think he has a lot of possibilities. So now, the main reason I don't have him in tier 1 and other people might is he's just so hard to play. Like, you have to hit your hooks, you have to time your flays correctly, and you have to make tough choices. So there are some mechanics in terms of hitting skill shots and timing the flay. Then they're also just making correct choices, like, do you actually go in on that hook? Where do you throw that lantern, right? Are you going to save it defensively to pull someone out of a fight or just to give them a shield, or are you going to use it offensively to pull someone into a fight? Is it even safe for you to engage to go in? Are you going to get blown up if that happens? Do you need to hang back and peel for your AD carry? Like, there are all these questions that you have to try to figure out, and there's not an easy answer to that. You can't ever find a guy that's going to tell you exactly what to do with Thresh in every situation. You just got to read the situation. He's a very non-linear champ. Like, there's a lot of different ways you can approach different fights. And so he's the hardest support in the game to play perfectly. So that's a huge key to it. And so you're just sweating so hard trying to get all of this right. And there are other champs that are just much easier to play that are very effective. I mean, someone like Maokai, for example, you just throw seeds everywhere. It's like AP Maokai and they walk through them. Someone gets near your AD carry, you W, you tie him up and then you just press R and like Q and, you know, just roll your hand across the keyboard and probably win the fight, right? So there are other champs that are a lot easier. I think even Leona is going to be easier to some extent than Thresh is. And if you get down to it, he doesn't have that much CC in terms of like hard lockdown, that person's not moving type of CC. All he really has is his hook, right? Which is a second and a half, which is good. You know, he has Flay, which is like, I guess, a half a second or something, if that. So he's got a little bit, but like your ultimate doesn't stun, it slows, which is nice for Peel, but people can still cast their spells. They can still use their dashes. And if they have Phase Rush, they can just run through it because they have 75% slow immunity. So there are some things out there that have way more CC than him. A lot of things out there that do. Like Leona, you know, her chain stun combination, if done perfectly, can be like 3.5 or 4 seconds worth of CC, and she has much shorter cooldowns. You know, her stun is like 5 seconds without any CDR on it. And then you've got Maokai, who, you know, if you hit them with a fully charged ult, like if you press your ult and then Kim Tank, run at them, hit them with your W, that's 1.4 seconds. Then you can knock them back into your roots, which is going to be like another half a second. So that's going to be almost 2 seconds. And then I think if the roots go 1,000 range, then it's like a 2.6 second root. So you're looking at like 4 to 4.5 seconds CC chain on Maokai that can hit multiple people. At least the 2.6 seconds on the roots can hit multiple people. So I think there are just other champs that have much higher probability of success, are much more consistent for the average player, and also are going to have a much longer raw CC chain that are going to stop people from moving than Thresh does. But the trade-off is Thresh has all that utility that I mentioned before. So great Thresh players. You could probably put him up in S, but the vast majority of people that play Thresh honestly would probably be in like B or C. But if you're like okay on Thresh, you know, I think A is a pretty good place to put him. Okay, we're through 45 minutes. I guess we'll just keep it under an hour. But Rel, getting nerfed on this patch, you know, like I said earlier, the W changes are very significant because that doesn't scale down per level at all, so it's 13 seconds at all levels. And you would really like to be able to transform twice in a fight, and it's going to be hard to do that. Even if you have a decent chunk of CDR, fights are going to have to probably go for like 8 seconds before you can get 2 of them off. I don't know the exact math, but if you have like 50 ability haste or something, it still is going to be tough. And she doesn't really want to get ability haste on her boots, for example. I think a lot of times she goes for a defensive boot, either Mercury Treads or Plated Steel Caps. So she's still going to have like pretty good engage options, especially if you transform into the horse and just charge them. That can be pretty decent. Has some resilience to poke if you're on horse and you walk over something or you're about to get hit with a skill shot. You can R or W and get your shield to block some of that. Your R is still going to be pretty good. So she still has a lot of good matchups. Still going to be great into Recon. Pretty good into Maokai. But overall, I think that she did get a little bit worse here into some matchups, especially into enchanters, is going to be a little bit worse. But I still think she'll be playable. I still think she'll be decent, like 50-51%. So I don't think she's totally going to be gutted. Bard is another one who's interesting. He does have a decent win rate. I've kind of gone off of Bard. I played him a lot near the end of last season, and a huge part of it is just Gale Force. It's just absolutely infuriating if they have Gale Force or Banshee's Veil or the lethality bubble item. I feel like there's just a lot of stuff that works really well against him. Now, he does have a high win rate, though. I don't know. Maybe I should try him out again. If people do start playing something like Jinx more, then I think he could be a really good play in a Jinx, because a lot of Jinxes are not going to get Gale Force. They're going to greed out and go Kraken. That is pretty good. Now, if you are going to do that, I would say, like, be careful. Like, you may want to ban Morgana, because Morgana is a really simple pick that like hard counters him, because you have all day to use your Morgana Black Shield, right? Like Bard's ult usually is going to be at least 1.5 seconds, and sometimes longer depending on how far you're throwing it. So you have all day to land that Morgana shield. So that can be really rough against Bard engages. But he does still roam really well. You know, he can make plays mid lane. He gets the chimes. He has really high base damages. The Mandate nerf definitely did hurt him at a certain point. It looks like people are still getting it. Locket is better. Shirelia's is a little bit better. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of people are going back towards Frozen Heart on him. It is a cheaper item. They did buff this. Almost no one's getting this these days, but that has been a rising alternative to Dead Man's Plate, which is kind of cool. Some people are still trying Rapid Fire at tier 3. That does allow you to get a little bit more damage. It is cheaper, so that is nice. So, you know, he has some okay options in there. He did lose Athene's Unholy Grail this season, which is kind of feels bad for him because his W is really not going to heal for that much without the Athene's charges. So there's definitely been some changes to his itemization, but he has had a decent win rate so far. It's just the prevalence of Gale Force is just really obnoxious. Or Vayne, or Ezreal, or just anyone, Lucian, that can dash and dodge your ult. But could be pretty decent, like I said, into Jinx, who's becoming popular. If you see Kog'Maws, into Tristana, it could be pretty good, because Tristana's also going to get Kraken. She's not going to get Gale Force most of the time, because a lot of Tristanas are very confident they're going to be able to buffer the CC and just W jump out. If you don't know what that is, watch the 80 carry tier list. I'm not going to explain it all now. But basically, they can get around a lot of CC with their rocket jump, but you can't get around this with rocket jump. You're going to get hit no matter what. And the rocket jump does have that little delay, and then it takes some time to jump out. So I don't think most Tristanas, depending on where you throw this ult, I don't think they're going to be able to jump out fast enough to not get hit by it. And it stops their momentum, right? So if they're mid-jump and you hit them with the R, then as soon as they wake up, they don't continue that jump. They just fall straight to the ground. So it's a really good setup against some of those immobile 80 carries out there. Great against some of the enchanters as well. So if you're against like a Lulu or a Janna, they don't have anything that can stop this either, because it can't be peeled. It's just this, you know, magical ball of energy that just hits them, and then you have 2.5 seconds to get there. That makes me think that in a lot of situations, Shirelias would be super good for the same reason as Recon. Is like whenever you start your engage, the Shirelias allows the rest of your team to run up and actually get some good follow-up. So that definitely might be something worth considering. So I don't know, maybe I should try him out. He's good against enchanters. He's good against immobile 80 carries. So it might be the time. He's going to be a lot worse against tank type of stuff, like your Leonas and your Rels. Like, you can lock them up and do some damage when they wake up, but obviously they're going to be a lot harder to kill. So good against squishies that don't have a lot of mobility. Last few champs, then we'll call it a day here. Yuumi, I still think is pretty good. She's still just a bit inconsistent for my taste most of the time. You know, if you do have someone on your team that gets fed, you can completely take over. And with like Darius and Garen still being very strong, just in like Udyr, Skarner, a lot of these really fast, like hyper-scaling types of champs. I guess Skarner and Udyr aren't technically like hyper-scaling, but y'all know what I'm saying. Fast stuff that can get ahead in other roles. You can still attach to them as Yuumi and do very well even if you lose lane. And it's going to be likely that you're going to lose lane if you play Yuumi. There might be some circumstances where you don't, but pairing her together with something like Twitch is extremely good. Because he can go invisible and Yuumi goes invisible with him, and he is getting buffed on this patch, so I expect to see a little bit more Twitch. I think he's getting buffed. I guess it's more like a change. Basically, AP is getting worse, but AD is getting buffed. And then something like Evelynn, just anything that's invisible can be good. But then also with like Vayne and Kai'Sa, she's still going to be really nice to a lesser extent, just really, really good scaling, but you have to not get completely run over in the laning phase. But even if you do, you might be able to scale through it still. So it's just like her late game is undeniably like ultra powerful, but can you get there, or is the enemy team just going to run away with it before you have an opportunity to get there? So that's something to keep in mind. Janna is very strong against some of the, so specifically against Rel, but against some of these other hard engaged champs, your Rels, your Leonas, to a lesser extent Maokai, I guess. She is very good. She doesn't have any engage, so that's a problem. And she doesn't have any way to speed up allies offensively. She can speed them up when they're running towards her with her passive, but she doesn't have any ways to like help facilitate fights. I guess you could take Shirelia's, and maybe that does help out a little bit. But she is going to be very good with that. It is nice that you do have a blend of shields and heals built into your kit with your E and your ultimate, so it makes it harder for them to choose whether they get the shield breaking item or the grievous wounds item. So that is helpful. So she's just kind of the queen of peel. If very good with something like a Jinx, or any sort of long range, immobile, AD carry like Cog, things like that. Can be very good if you give them enough protection. So she's okay. There are certain matchups where she is very good. Like I said, specifically against Rel, but there are a couple of others also who can be very strong. And then Nami, lots of CC, good kill potential early, doesn't scale as hard as some of the other champions out there, doesn't have the steroids, like Lulu gives the extra on-hit damage with picks, or on-attack damage with picks and attack speed, all that stuff. Yumi, extra attack speed, extra movement speed. Janna, extra AD on her shield. Nami just doesn't have that kind of stuff. She does give some movement speed with her E for a short period of time, which is cool, but she's good. She's just great if you want to go for those kills with like a Jhin or a Misfortune or something in lane. It's just the potential to get outscaled. And then you have Soraka, who I think is a lot better than it appeared. I know that she really just kind of crushed whenever I tried to play Maokai support and I was going for the AP version. Soraka seemed like it hard countered me. Like, it was really rough. So if you can't get on Soraka to shut her up, then she will just take over the game by herself. And she's particularly good if you have tanks on your team, so you get a lot more value out of the healing because they're going to have more resistances. Then also, if your team doesn't have that much healing, if you're forcing them to get grievous wounds just for you and for nobody else, and that's great. So if you're playing something like Vayne these days is not going to get that much healing. A lot of ADCs are not going to get that much healing anymore. Most of them have moved off of Shield Bow. A lot of them still don't get Bloodthirster. Yeah, you've still got Draven. Yeah, you've still got Samira. So there's a couple that do, but not many do. And then you're seeing some champions kind of move away from Gore Drinker and move towards Stridebreaker instead. So like Gnar is someone who's done this, and there's more and more champs that are shifting away from that into Stridebreaker. So they're not going to have as many healing items there. So she's very, very good. If they don't get grievous wounds, she's super OP. But if they're even if they're just getting it just for you, then that means they're not going to have as much damage to kill some of these other things out there, like the Udyrs, the Skarners, all that kind of stuff. They're not going to be able to kill them because they had to waste 800 gold. Not waste, but try to spend 800 gold to slow you down. So very good against other enchanters, farm off lanes, if you're against tanks or if you have tanks on your team. Just if it's going to be slow 5v5 fights that are going to be drawn out for 5 or 10 seconds, you know, she's going to be one of the best champs out there. Very, very good against poke, too, because very low cooldown, and you can apply your healing retroactively, right? Versus, like, you know, something like Lulu, you can shield to start, but if someone gets poked first, if you're too slow on the shield, or they've already been poked out, you were out of range or something to shield, then you can't retroactively heal them up as easily. Versus Soraka can do that. So, anyways, I think she can be pretty good. And Sona is very similar to Soraka, just doesn't have as much raw retroactive healing. I'd probably still rather just play Seraphine in those circumstances, but Sona can be better sometimes. And then the last minute or two here, I'll just hit a couple more ones that are popular that people might ask about. Zyra and Brand, I think, are pretty good right now. They just require expensive items. Leandries versus Maokai can still get Mandate. I think he does more damage overall. He has more CC and cheaper items and more versatile items. So if you get really fed on Zyra and Brand, I think they can be good, but their items are still just going to be too expensive for my taste. Pike, we already went over him a little bit. It's tough to see exactly where he's going to go. The healing is almost certainly going to help out a ton in the laning phase. So if you're very good at landing those hooks, and if you're in a kill lane, you get that Prowler's Claw early, it might be off to the races. So we'll see. Pike might be sleeper. You know, maybe he deserves to be a list on this, but it remains to be seen. So I still think he'll be pretty good. Alistar might be something that people argue, well, why isn't he up higher? My thing is he just doesn't do enough. Like, his ult is nice in team fights later, but a lot of these big tanks are already going to be unkillable, like Rel and Leona in team fights. People are not going to focus fire you as much most of the time. So the ultimate used to be really good, but in the age of Aftershock and some of these other tanks, it lost a lot of value. He still does have a premier engage. It is short range. The W, I think, is 650 range versus something like Leona is 1100 range on the engage. Maokai, with his ultimate, you know, has a pretty long range engage as well, although it's slow. Bard, long range engage. So he's kind of short range. His damage is kind of low compared to some of the other champs. His CC duration total is kind of low, kind of like what I talked about with Thresh. You know, your WQ combo is going to be like a half-second knock-up. We'll go 5 minutes over. We'll go over an hour here because I do want to hit on just a couple more champions. So that's going to be just, you know, a little bit, just the total time CC'd and the total amount of utility that he brings is just a little bit lower. It is still a premier engage because it's point-click. You know, there you go. You have your fight. I would probably rather do Recon. Like, Recon just has more versatility to his kit, I think. Now, Alistar is going to be more resistant to CC and getting blown up. So if they do have, you know, like Ashe or Veigar or, you know, that type of stuff, yes, Alistar is going to be better than Recon. But I don't know. He's okay. I might just be hating on him a little bit. But even in Pro, he gets picked all the time in Pro right now, but his win rate's really not that good. It's 50% on 11.4, which is, you know, respectable. It's not bad. But then on 11.3, it was 47%. So, and then in solo queue, I don't know. It's probably like 50%-ish. Yeah, it's 50%. So he's not terrible. He's okay. I could definitely see an argument for him being like A tier. I would not put him up into S, but I could see an argument for him being like as high as like maybe high A tier around like Thresh area or something if you're really good on him or you just really enjoy him. Other one, Swain is something that is really good against Maokai. I've played against a lot. If you get ahead early, he does have a really annoying engage. It's long range, and it's very difficult to dodge if he aims it correctly. So Swain can be super good with something like a Jhin specifically. You can chain CC and follow up with that damage. So that is something to consider. Braum did get buffed, I think it was last patch, so he's still pretty good. He's just a peeler tank with an unreliable engage, but if you do have a really strong teamfight comp that's going to last for a long time, he can still be good. I still think he's going to get outscaled by the Lulu, the Sorakas, Seraphines, that type of stuff. So I'd rather, if you're just betting on long fights, long team fights, I'd rather just play an Enchanter, but he can be alright. Galio's okay, does decent damage early on, a little bit more conditional on the engage, very long cooldowns, but good in some circumstances. Who are the last couple ones? Like Nautilus, pretty good, has a nice big hitbox, very reliable engage with his ult. You can't really dodge it, so great against the Gale Force users. He's just kind of made of paper. He's very squishy. Like his W just does not provide the same level of survivability as something like a Leona, Rel, a lot of these other champs. It's possible he could be like a decent Frozen Heart user. Another thing that I'll mention about him is he goes out of mana real quick with his, like, his best build is the Emax, and a lot of, you just can't do that as much anymore because it costs 90 mana a pop, and you don't have that old school presence of mind from last season to give you 500 free mana now. So he really was a huge victim of that because his mana pool is not that big to start with. And you're probably not getting a mana item early either. You're either getting Locket or Chem Tank. So you can go Zeke's second, which gives you some mana, and it's an okay item, you know, on him. Still pretty decent, but it's second item now, whereas it was first item last season. You get Zeke's first. So you just have a lot less mana than you used to have. So that means that you're going to have to max your Q, probably just for mana purposes, and it's okay. It does allow you to throw more hooks, but it's just not as much AoE damage with the E-spam, which is something that he really did well compared to other tanks, was he put out some serious damage in like long team fights with the E-spam. It was really good, and he had very good wave clear too. So you could get priority in your lane and go roam a little bit better. So, I mean, obviously you aren't killing the minions, but you get them really low, you know, to help your Kai'Sa and stuff wave clear faster. So, anyways, he lost a lot of the stuff that made him really powerful, but he can still be good in the right circumstances if you want that guaranteed engage. He also can't hook over walls, so that's something very significant too, is it's a lot harder to sneak attack people than it is with, you know, someone like a Thresh or a Blitzcrank. Okay, and then just last couple of seconds here, Shaco pretty much got guttered, as we mentioned before, thrown into the gutter there. He just lost a lot of damage on his boxes. He's already hard to play, so I don't like seeing that. I wish they would have kept him in the game. I don't play him a lot. He's annoying to play against, but he's a unique type of support, and it's just kind of lame to see him go. I would not recommend, I know some people are playing like Tom Kinch in Pro, that's specifically with fasting Senna, and I just do not like that strategy in solo queue. Maybe if you're duoed with somebody and you guys practice it a ton, maybe it can work, but my boy Kinch, I like him, but he's in a rough spot right now. Jarvan, I know that was something that some Korean teams were playing. I just don't think it's that good in a lot of circumstances. Obviously, they're smart people, but I think they were just kind of trying some stuff out. Pantheon's been nerfed too much. And there are some other champs that can certainly be good in here, but that's all we have time to talk about today. So thank you very much. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time.